got microphones, so if you press your little button when you want to speak, I'll just start with a short whakatauki. With a short karakia. Whakatakate ho ki te uru, whakatakate ho ki te tonga, kia makina kina kia uta, kia matara tara ki tai, ehi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihe Māori ora. Kia ora. And thank you all for being here. I've got two apologies that were given to me prior to the meeting, and they were written on another piece of paper. They are Mari Black, Mayor of Huranui, and Craig Mackey, Mayor of Kaikoura. Are there any other apologies?
And just Deborah Cunningham from Health.
And Deborah Cunningham from Health, which I'm not very happy about, I have to say. Mayor Nigel, you'd like to move that the apologies be accepted, seconded by Sam Broughton. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. There's no conflicts of interest have been advised to me prior to the meeting. No deputations or requests to speak via the public forum. The reason why it's so important that you use the microphone is because this meeting is being recorded as it is a public meeting under the Local Government Act. We're coming to the minutes. I want to confirm the PX minutes as well, so we don't have to go back into PX. So as long as nobody's got any questions on the PX minutes, which you shouldn't because they're all very straightforward, would someone like to move that the two sets of minutes be confirmed? John Sunkel, and seconded by Graham, who hasn't got his name tag in front of him, so it doesn't make it very easy. Graham Smith. No, I just couldn't remember your name, Mr. Smith. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And are there any matters arising from the minutes? I don't recall if I've got any. Sorry. So the report should begin with the COVID-19 report from the CDHB, but James, are you going to give us a quick?
I will attempt to give you at least a very short update from health. If I can just find my notes, apologies. Where did it go? Right. So Peter Bramley gave a brief to the regional leadership group yesterday, particularly talking about what's happening in the Canterbury District Health Board. They've established a specific COVID ward and have additional ventilators for when this virus does sort of get here into our population. Currently, as of yesterday, our vaccinations for the Canterbury DHB area were at 94% for first dose and 82% for fully vaccinated, with an expectation by the end of the first week of December we'll be at fully 90% vaccinated, double vaccination. What does that currently mean? It still means that there's 64,000 people in the Canterbury area that are unvaccinated, including 8,600 Māori and 2,500 Pacific people. So it's still quite a large portion of our vulnerable community unvaccinated. South Canterbury District Health Board is slightly behind the 90% mark for their first dose. I think they'd previously reported that they'd just broken over it, but with some re-understanding of who's in their district health board area and who's not, they're now just under 90% first dose, and they are finding it very hard to get into that last 10, well, that coming up to 10% of the population. That's probably all that I can offer from health at this time. Peter Bramley probably would have been here, but he had a meeting with the Prime Minister that he couldn't get out of. So yeah. Also in the notes there's an update from Community and Public Health. Community and Public Health have been incredibly engaged in the whole COVID process, particularly supporting Auckland. I think they've done a pretty impressive job at being able to reach up and reach out and actually help the rest of New Zealand while still meeting the needs here in Canterbury. And Hamish Sanderson, also from Community Public Health, wanted to raise just a bit about heat wave planning. There's a bit of work going on trying to get a better understanding in New Zealand of what heat means from a New Zealand context in heat health, and whether or not we can actually get a definition for when a heat wave that may cause issues with human health actually defined in this country, because currently it's not defined. And I'll leave it at that. Sorry.
So I'm actually going to add another recommendation about receiving we've received a written report. It's actually not fair to put on James what the organisations, this is pretty poor to find out on the day of the meeting that they're not sending someone. I'm pretty ropeable actually. This is me ropeable. So I'm actually going to request that the DHB meet with us by Zoom, which we will set up hopefully next week. I know there's so much space in all of your diaries, but within the next fortnight we'll set up a Zoom meeting and ask for a proper briefing on the situation. And I'm just deeply disappointed. It's not fair on James either, just to have that put on him at the last minute. Dan. Yeah, it's the. Yep. So it's the COVID update and planning beyond. So it's the vaccine update and planning for the new traffic light system, because that is we'll be in that space very soon. Well, the other thing that I wanted to raise was, and I should be raising it, was somebody from health. I don't know. I felt a little bit, I don't know. No, I wasn't that disappointed. I've come to expect it. But the heat wave planning, I don't know if you read that book on what happened in Chicago, but if local government isn't part of the solution for this, then I don't know who is. This is all about community resilience, and it's all about connected neighbours. The people who died in Chicago during the heat wave were people who didn't know their neighbours. So people who survived were really well connected in their communities. This is the first time I have seen heat wave presented at a CDEM meeting since I've been on CDEM for 8 years now. I've never seen heat wave highlighted like this. So if this is a matter that we need to take seriously, and I'm suspecting it's in this paper because we do, then I want us to progress to better than waiting for them to tell us what they're going to do. So I don't know how we get that on the agenda as well.
We'll just go back to the previous point. Kurt might slap me down there, but as an ambulance officer going through ED, through the emergency department at the moment, there are real constraints in getting people through and their ability to process within that first triage space, and that is without COVID, that's without flu, without a whole bunch of things. So I think in that question that we ask, what processes and systems might be put in place, because it's impacting right back through Kurt's organisation, my organisation, into the community. So real challenges in health and just getting people through. So if we could add that to that question, please. I
noted that they said that the emergency preparedness coordinator was presenting on this topic to managers of aged care residential care facilities on Friday the 28th of October. Perhaps we could ask them to come back, so that community and public health to come back with something more purposeful for us to really, you know, get stuck into. Yeah.
Thanks. I've just come from a workshop this morning with health around where a lot of this has been discussed, and I know that right now there's the CDHB Tactical Advisory Group meeting, and I suspect that's why they're not here. I've sent an alternative to that where a lot of that stuff's been discussed. But in regards to John's point, it's not so much COVID that's causing the issues per se, it's the delays that's causing it. And if you look at ambulance services around the world, what's crippling them through COVID is what we call ramping at hospitals. So ambulance crews arriving at hospital and then getting stuck in the ambulance bay with the patient for 2 hours. And going to heat, we know heat for the last 2 to 3 years has caused a significant strain on the ambulance service. You get a hot day, we get a whole lot of heat-related illness, and I'm surprised it hasn't come to this group beforehand.
I'm not sure. Can we frame a sentence around here? Request COVID vaccine update and future planning. I think we can ask them to report more extensively in February then for the heat wave planning. Yep, and the role that we could play.
I'm sure Hamish will want to do that.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Good. So that's. So I've moved and seconded. So is there any discussion? Yep.
Endorse your comments, Madam Chair. It is disappointing CDHB aren't here today. This is really important, and in light of the conversation we had in the previous forum as well, getting a clear understanding of the planning and how we can partner in this, because we're getting increasing questions from our communities, I think is really, really vital. So the sooner we can have that discussion, the better, with Peter and the relevant team members, and maybe even including the Ministry of Health if required, because obviously they've got an involvement at a senior level in that as well. So if it's a resourcing issue, we can be making those pleas, all those questions to them directly. But I think that's a really good initiative.
Thank you. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Right. Next item's the Canterbury flood event update on strategic issues, and that's over to you, Robert.
As the Joint Committee will recall, the CDEM group prepared 3 papers to endeavouring to resolve some significant issues that arose as a result of the Canterbury flood event. One of them was a timing inequity around the calculation of the NZTA threshold before an emergency works additional funding assistance rate is applied. Essentially what that means is that if repair works arising from an event span 2 financial years, then 2 thresholds have to be met, one for each financial year, and that puts the TAs at a financial disadvantage. So the paper was seeking the application of only one threshold, and that threshold be based on the maintenance budget in the financial year the emergency event occurred. The second paper was around relating to financial assistance for lifestyle blocks, small land holdings. This group falls through the cracks in every emergency event involving rural property and rural land. Then there was a third paper looking at initial bridge across the Ashburton River to deal with issues around losing access along the State Highway 1 corridor, particularly through Ashburton. We also were looking at revisiting the redesignation of roads that were formerly state highways into local roads, and whether or not they should be redesignated back as state highways as alternate routes. And a third part of the third paper was around seeking additional funding support for river management and river protection works over and above like-for-like repairs to river protection works that were damaged as a result of the event. We've received responses to all of those papers, and I'll just make a general comment that they were fairly lightweight responses, to be brutally honest. And they are summarised in the paper along with our comments against each of the responses. The papers were originally forwarded to NEMA as our strategic partner, if you like, in all things emergency management, with the hope that they would pick these papers up and pursue them as requested in the papers. I'll just maybe make some comments around areas that we're seeking your approval to pursue and those that we're thinking that we don't pursue, starting with the ones that we're suggesting we don't pursue. The lifestyle block small holdings matter appears to be progressing as we would have expected. It seems to have been picked up by NEMA and seems to be progressing through all of the appropriate government agencies. And they've indicated that a response is yet to come. So we're recommending that we don't pursue that particular matter at this time, but wait until we receive a formal response. The second matter that we're not proposing we pursue is relating to the additional funding relating to river protection and river management works. We found out in the response that government has recently made available $15.5 million to the Canterbury region for additional river management protection works. And in addition to that, the government through NEMA will be funding 60% of eligible repair works arising from damage arising from the recent flood event. And given that NEMA are the agency that would be providing this funding, the response from the Minister wasn't inclined to support our request. So given the fact that the funding's been made available and the fact that NEMA are funding 60% of eligible repair works, we're proposing that we don't pursue that. The papers that we are proposing be pursued and the matters that should be pursued, the funding assistance rate. What we're seeking there is that only one threshold be applied for the Canterbury flood event, the councils that sustained damage, and in general that this how the threshold is calculated is reviewed and, if appropriate, applied nationally so that only one threshold is applicable to all future events. The other matter that we're recommending be pursued is the bridge across the Ashburton River. Either the second bridge, which is currently significantly advanced by Ashburton District Council, excuse me, or upgrading the existing State Highway 1 bridge. But it appears that upgrading the existing State Highway 1 bridge isn't a viable or easy option. So what we're seeking there is that the project, the second bridge project, be advanced and approved, put into the National Land Transport Program, that that funding approvals, and it's put into the program in the 21-22 financial year, and that project phases commence in the 22-23 financial year. We've also included the funding splits between the Ashburton District Council, NZTA and NZTA or government in terms of additional funding support, and that is consistent with Ashburton District Council's formal funding position. The other one that we were asked to pursue at the KEG meeting was asking for the roads that were previously state highways to be revisited and, if appropriate, redesignated as state highways. The information as to the reasons why outlined in the paper. We've also added into that, which we were going to pursue separately with NZTA, a way of developing a system or a process where all of the TAs and NZTA could be joined up in terms of publicly advising the travelling public of roads that are closed and detours. Because the state highway information says what state highways are closed, but it doesn't necessarily then lead on to what the local roads are. So we've added that to this particular work stream, and we've also asked that NZTA work with the Regional Council and the TAs on the redesignations and the development of that system and process. So we were proposing that the funding assistance rate paper go direct to NZTA. That's a minor admin matter, and I don't know why it's got to where it's got to, but anyway, we're proposing that that letter go directly to the Chief Executive of NZTA, and the matters relating to the Ashburton Bridge and redesignation of state highways go to the Prime Minister, copy to the Minister of Transport, and copy to the CE of NZTA. I'm happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair, if there are
Any questions? It's a very comprehensive report.
Madam Chair, I don't have any questions, but I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Neil. I'm surprised.
As speak to the recommendation, Ashburton District Council has said for some years that a second bridge across the river is needed, and when the flooding event it was more than emphasised that it was needed. We've just completed stage 2 of a 3-stage business case, and stage 2 stated that there is a definite need for the bridge, and it also confirmed the location of where the bridge would go. So it is definitely needed, definitely required for resilience and connectivity. Happy to move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? John Sunkel. Any other discussion?
I'd just like to thank
Yep.
Robert for the comprehensive report, and I guess from my understanding of the issues as they come through Environment Canterbury and the combination of these places, I think you're right on the nail with where you're travelling, and I would really hope that we get some genuine support back out of government. Prime Minister in Ashburton, when we were there, did say that support would come if the case was made, so really hope that this might bring that about.
Yeah, very good work. All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Right, the next item is the May Flood After Action report, and that is James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So attached here is the report that we commissioned. So I think this is the first time. It is the first time we've commissioned a proper formal after action report to any of our emergencies since the Kaikoura earthquake. So we contracted resilient organisations to do this piece of work for us, to capture the lessons learned and then make that into an after action report. It considered, as it says there, the following bits: the activation processes we use across the region, about how we create that common operating picture, our control and coordination that we use between sort of ECC, Emergency Coordination Centre, and the EOCs, a public engagement and maintaining momentum in that early stages of recovery. It's identified what worked well, where there's improvements, and has made 35 recommendations for us to consider. And with a note that those recommendations need to be assigned to individuals or agencies, and clear implementation plans designed to ensure lessons are not just captured but acted on, and I'd full-heartedly support that. Next steps would be, as I saw them, was to get the group office to develop a work program to implement those recommendations. But I think that, just talking with Madam Chair, I think there was a step before that of actually deciding which recommendations we actually want to see action taken on. So that could come in the next joint committee in care.
Yeah, what I was keen for us to do is actually to formally adopt the recommendations. But I mean, this is an exceptional report, and I was absolutely thrilled with it. It's easy to read, it's logical, and it's obviously talked to the right people. So it's got really good feedback in it. I did have one piece of feedback that doesn't make it into the report, which is that when you're the mayor of the city and you declare for a region but your city's not affected, there is an issue. So, and it's best not to have the declaration reported in your name, because otherwise people come and ask you questions that you can't possibly answer. But I actually think that the paper that comes back, and I think we should agree that a paper setting out the recommendations and the implementation plan, along with the allocation to the relevant, the relevant responsibilities. So that is the report that comes. So it's not slowing anything down, but it means that we will formally adopt the recommendations. It means that the implementation plan will also include a mechanism for reporting back, so that we can see that they are, because I keep using this little phrase, which is that lessons are not learned until they're embedded in the way we do things in the future. So that's what I would like to see happen with this report. It's an excellent report.
Thank you for that. That was my question. How would we sit down and apportion the responsibilities when they sit with TAs or other entities, Environment Canterbury, and I read the issues there. So having a very clear outline of where those responsibilities sits, and Giles reminded me yesterday in Audit and Risk Committee of having that action plan and results that goes out the other end to ensure that those actions have been carried through. So yeah, I fully understand and accept what you're looking to try and achieve.
Madam Chair, just a query on your comment about because you're the chair of the Joint Committee, under current legislation, you have the first cab off the rank, basically, to declare for the region.
No, I know. I'm not saying that you don't. I'm not saying I don't.
No, I agree with what you're saying, but now's a good time with us to test that out with the legislation in terms of the changes in the legislation, if you see it's an issue?
No, I would not want to take that responsibility away from mayors.
No, I didn't mean that. I
no.
mean, for the way it's set out at the moment, because you're the chair of the Joint Committee, because you're the elected member, you're basically the hierarchy number one for declaring for the group area.
Yeah, I know.
The Canterbury. But
we could have declared for a subgroup. I mean, that we didn't actually have to declare for the region. We did so to make it easier for people to opt in and out. But yeah, I don't know if that's the issue.
And we could have asked one of the mayors from the affected area still to declare for the whole region as well.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know that the legislation needs to change.
I believe it is, but I'm not just sure. Simon might. So I think at the moment you're the hierarchy and deputy, and then anyone else is
So at the
that's
moment,
where it sits at the moment.
any elected official can declare, but
Yeah.
the way it's set out is basically because you're the chair of the Joint Committee.
Yeah.
That's your number one, and then any other elected official, any mayor.
Yeah. So
That's how it works.
And maybe it's just that one thing, and maybe under that circumstance I should have got you to declare. That's on the group. Maybe that's the way.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's an internal thing that you could.
Yeah, it is an internal thing.
Yeah.
Right. Are there any questions? Have we moved and seconded that? Have we got wording for the?
So you recommended recommendations and an implementation plan and how we report back
And how-
to be
yeah.
added to the
Yeah, it's kind of the monitoring framework as well. Yeah. Yep. All right. So I'll move that. John, would you? Yep. Thank you. And I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Next item is the Canterbury CDEM plan and strategy. James.
Thank you. This one's been a moving feast for a wee while now, and I know Neville battled with it when he was, before he retired. So currently the CDEM group plan was adopted in June 2014, and it had some updates in 2018. But there's a requirement that we begin our review of these within 5 years of them being adopted. So as such, our one is well overdue. That delay has always been due to the uncertainty of the outcome of the national work. But recently, talking with Simon and other NEMA people, there's been a recommendation that we continue to go on with that review and do it in such a way that we can account for changes in the Act when they happen. So what I've proposed is that the group office will begin in the new year to start the review with a look at our hazard portfolio first, and we've got a new mechanism, a new tool that we use for that actually becomes more about consequence management rather than actually managing the hazard itself. But for that to be effective, we're going to have some quite decent workshops across the region with councils and with our partner agencies and other interested people to pull those together. But it is an exciting change, and I think a positive change around how we actually look at what hazards do to our communities. Going forward into the actual group plan review itself, I think we're seeing as I'm only in the acting role, I think it's better to wait until Sean Poff's on board as the group manager to make some determination as the actual direction for the proper group plan review itself. But I think we could start looking at, even before next year potentially, some more sort of strategic thinking about what the group plan should do and take into account the National Disaster Resilience Strategy. But the group office, we've begun thinking about this, but would welcome any feedback or any concepts that you think we should consider as we go into that process. Not in the report, I know that it's come up in joint committee before, is just the concept of regionalisation, and I know that regionalisation is in the new Trifecta Act change, and there will be some options made available to us in a consultation document. I think, Simon, you were saying before Christmas, but I think it's actually just after Christmas that it comes out. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, it does tie into the next report as well, doesn't it, in that regard? Any questions?
I was going to say, I think it's good that we start that conversation, but 10th of January, I think the trifecta stuff comes out, so half of us will still be on holiday or asleep. So, regardless of what we do, we will have that really clear indication of where government's thinking, and I guess it'll inform both conversations, but I guess I would have liked us to have been a wee bit further down the track of our thinking to inform government rather than government informing us, if you get the drift.
Yeah, Simon.
Just clarifying, probably from the papers that I presented, there is a couple of amendments to that. So the actual targeted engagement's actually been pushed out because of that very fact that it's over Christmas and New Year and there'll be nobody around.
So when is the public discussion document?
I think it starts in the middle of February now. Yeah.
I was so gobsmacked when I read the 10th of July. I don't believe it. Yeah. So the public discussion document will come out in February.
In February.
And then there will be hui engagements during that February, March.
As well. Yep.
Right, so everything just slips a month.
It does, yeah.
Right.
As well as the select committees further down the track.
Well, it's probably not a bad thing that we're talking about this at the same time.
Yep.
Is it? No,
frequency.
so,
I think, as James has pointed out, the key thing probably for your group plan is to do the hazard analysis. There will be obviously change, like every group will be asked to redo their group plan once the new bill's enacted, which
Yeah.
is optimistically middle of next year, but that's knowing legislation that could
the
take
bill
longer.
enacted by,
Yeah, that's what it says.
it can't be enacted by the middle of next year.
End of the year.
It
of
can't
the
be
year.
enacted by the end of the year.
Yeah,
Not
October or
possible.
something.
Now that
Oh,
that
no,
has
it
been
doesn't matter
pushed
if we all
back,
go off and have an election.
will we still get that information in January, or will we be waiting? till
No,
February?
it'll be in February.
So we will get it in February as
Yeah.
well.
Do you think it would be sensible to feed back to the powers that be a suggestion that actually allowing the final stages of legislation to go through during an election campaign for the local government sector, which essentially is, you know, a lead role within civil defence?
I think that has
Do you
been
think
raised,
there's
yeah.
something about that that doesn't quite match?
Yep.
I don't know. What do you reckon?
I think it has been raised with them.
Oh, I'm feeling a letter coming on. Can I write another letter? Would you mind if I wrote a letter to the Minister?
I think it's a good idea.
I'd like to write a letter to the Minister of Civil Defence, suggesting that this time frame could be pushed a little so that the local government sector could focus 100% on what is a really significant piece of legislation and enable us to carry through in a seamless way the work that we're going to be doing on our planning frameworks as well. The Canterbury Mayoral Forum had a discussion around the climate risk assessment, and some of the work that's being done in that space will actually be very relevant to the work that we want to be doing here. So that would be quite good to connect that. Yep. Right. Okay. So so back to the. No, sorry. Right, I'm getting confused. Right. So the have I got a? I haven't got a mover and a seconder, have I? No. Who would like to move? Craig. Sam. We're moving that we receive the report on the review of Canterbury Civil Defence Group Plan, note the commencement of the review of the regional hazard risk profile, and LD to, oh, I might put the third one under the next report. Yep. So it's just those two. Oh, so that's Sam Broughton seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And not the next one, the one after. So, Lifeline's Resilience Fund, Mark Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to come up to the front and show you some pictures on the little screen up there, if that's okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Sorry, go on, haven't you?
I've got a speaker here. Sorry? Yes, yeah, I've got to make it go.
So I've gone to
We just have to master the technology first. Yes, so's my laptop. It did that before, didn't it? Yeah,
wastewater plant just recently. Stand and Pause were here for the assessment the other day, and I said the only thing unusual about that is that it didn't happen after we went out for consultation on our annual plan. Because every time something happens.
Oh, yeah, there's something that's just, it's just remorseless.
It is remorseless.
It just is like rage.
It's 5 years since the Huronoi Kaikoura earthquake. 5 years, can you believe that?
well, hooray, the technology has actually worked, so that's all good. Once again, thank you, and it's great to be here to talk through some of the resilience and lifelines work that we've been working on. and I hope that I can kind of get back in future meetings and talk some more on it. The main purpose today actually really is to talk through the Resilience Fund. So this is the NEMA Resilience Fund that after a few years in abeyance has just come back to life. And we secured some funding to take our Canterbury Lifelines work to the next stage. And I just want to kind of go through some of that with you and also share some of the vulnerability stuff we've been looking at. So, with that in mind, what are lifelines? Well, we've got over 50 of them in Canterbury, and I'm sure that slide's out of date, but it's a pretty complex set of infrastructure sectors and networks that we work with. And, over the years, I've been doing this 25 plus years, I've got to know so many people in these different sectors and a better understanding of their networks, which actually helps to contribute, I think, to that kind of high level, that kind of, what's the right word, across everything, understanding of how things work and fit together. And the next slide just kind of shows that, those kind of interconnections, the interdependencies. We know about the Ashburton Bridge. Across that bridge, and I don't know whether it still does go across the sewer pipe, it might have gone under the river now, but our fibre optic networks and other things that are so important, they're all kind of interconnected. And so if we're thinking about a resilient society and region, we actually have to think about the interconnectedness of things and of our infrastructure networks. And that's very much what we're trying to sort of work towards. So in terms of the fund, we put in 2 applications. The first one was some situational reporting. We weren't successful with that, but we got this other one. And I've got a diagram that'll kind of explain it better than those words. But essentially, we want to kind of advance our maturity from where we are now and the kind of things we're doing to a greater level. And I might add that it's actually a level that Wellington has actually got to by putting some serious funding into it. And this, probably the diagram, and sorry at the back if it's too small a screen, but you'll get the gist of it. And at the bottom left, core practice, current vulnerability assessments, and that's our little kind of piece of work on the left-hand side there. It's qualitative. We get to understand the networks and their vulnerabilities, but not necessarily the impacts. The impacts on economy, the impacts on social and cultural and so forth well-being. So that's generally where we sit. At that kind of highly quantitative, coming right up, and you'll see the Wellington Lifelines report, is where they've done what we call the advanced practice. They've brought in tools and processes and very robust data and developed a business case for investment and what that might look like. And what that meant was that they could actually look across the different sectors of transport, electricity, ports, etc., and identify some mitigation, some works and investments that they could make that would actually enhance resilience and actually reduce the impact on GDP. So that's the piece of work they did. So we know, and Steve Ferris, I think, was at a meeting or 2 ago and showed you the Lifelines portal, that little blue blob there, and how that is really helping us to kind of, to display and overlay information and get a better understanding. But into that, there is so much science and research, that's being done around the country through, Resilience to Nature's Challenges, Deep South, AF8, all of these programs. There's an awful lot of stuff that's there that we want to, and have started to, but want to get into that portal and then look at how does this pathway evolve. How do we use those research outputs? How do we use the tools? How can we use the things like merit and riskscape there at the top, which are quantitative, data hungry, but boy, they give you some good results and some good analyses. And that's really, if you like, the nutshell of what we're trying to do. Any questions on that, just while I'm pausing? A simple one here is really just a 5-step, what we're doing with this piece of work, and it's going through to roughly about the end of June next year. Scanning stock take, so that's where we're at now, just finalising that. What have we been doing around the country in the different Lifelines groups? What's the research landscape? What sort of work's been done? Who are the social and economic and cultural stakeholders we should engage with and look at their sites and locations and how they might be affected by these events? And then just coming across what this intermediate approach might look like, those blobs in the middle, establish a pilot, and we might do some work in South Canterbury, North Canterbury perhaps, with the utilities up there, have a look at events, certainly AF8, maybe a coastal tsunami, certainly river flooding as well with what's been happening. So we'll get some pilot work going and try and do some proof of concept work around these things. The GIS data is a big part of it, just capturing the right information, defining the attributes that we need, and working with our utilities to get that stuff populated. And again, Steve will have shown you some of the layers that we already have, but we need to get more. And then we'll do the pilot and see what we can make of it. Okay? So that's really the project in a nutshell, and I've just got a few slides here to show you some of the kind of work that we've been doing and what it looks like. But before that, there's that research landscape, and there's a lot of stuff going on around the country, and my challenge, if you like, is to try and join the dots, work with the university folk, the research partners and so forth, to see, well, this work that you guys have done, how does it fit in? How can we actually pull the results in? These hazards models that are evolving all of the time, how do we pull all that information in the right way? Yeah, so now to some of that qualitative stuff, if you like. And just a few slides on some different sectors, different locations, and this is documented in our kind of report. So electricity, for example, there's the Waitaki scheme, and we would go and talk, or have been to talk to Meridian and Genesis, and ask them about, well, what have you got in your networks? What are you worried about in terms of the hazards and so forth? But not just those guys. We talked to Transpower, Alpine Energy, Electricity Ashburton, etc., etc. And you can just see some examples of maps there. And getting back to the Mackenzie, my mare down there, Mackenzie, you'll be familiar with this part of the world. There's Lake Ruatana for Laukohar on the left, and we know that there are faults such as the Osler, Irishman's Creek, that actually go through there, and they actually cut right through, pieces of infrastructure. But you speak to the Meridian guys, and they say, yes, we know this. We've done a lot of dam break work, and we've done a lot of assessments. We're very confident with what we have, and if that actually did cut the canal, well, we know what's going to happen to the water and the water flow, and it's all kind of mapped out. So the thinking has been done. So that's kind of the the mapping on the left, and on the right, it's that kind of stuff around Ohau C, Ohau B, the canal system, etc. The robustness of same. But as you can see, it's qualitative, righto? It's telling us about the networks and the infrastructure and what might happen. Moving to our friend, the AF8, and this is I think Steve did show us this the other day. That on the left is our modified Mercalli shaking, so that's the wobble that you feel wherever you might be. And traditionally, we always sort of thought about orange, which is 7, being the trigger for liquefaction, and surely this happened in Christchurch. But interestingly, those two little snaps on the right are our Darfield and our Christchurch Earthquakes 2010, 2011. Sorry, the colours aren't quite right in the greens, but the orange and the yellow are, and just look at the difference in scale, of what AF8 and the shaking does. It's not, I feel for the West Coast with the red, and that's getting up to 9 and 10. But, interestingly, there are little blobs of red that emerge in other places. And one of those places is Timaru Port. So that becomes, and I see Bede's gone now, that becomes something of a hotspot, because we're expecting some quite intense shaking from AF8 around the area of Timaru Port, and we know there are some vulnerabilities with, with port structures. We know we have a railway line that runs through there, and actually as it proceeds south, it's getting quite close to the sea, and it's on a spit and so forth, and we've got our highway running through there. So we know, that AF8 is something that we need to sort of be concerned about and look at here. And again, on the right, and it's in the small print, is that descriptive stuff around, in this case, the port. The colours change now, because we're just looking at tsunami evacuation zones, and we're going to actually populate inundation depths and what have you soon. But tsunami evacuation zones around Christchurch, you can see the estuary, and where that photo up there is, now we're looking at the Woolston area, and the various fuel terminals, all of the gas facilities, liquid gas and rock gas, etc., are all pretty much co-located. The railway runs right through the middle. I think from memory we're around 3 or 4 metres above sea level there. It's not a lot, And so we know that that, again, is a bit of a hotspot for Christchurch, because most of our fuel is piped over the hill and lands in that fuel terminal in Woolston. So we might be looking to Timaru and their terminals down there, which are on higher ground. But this is, a vulnerability for us. To move to a flood example, and again, this particular picture is just a PDF from a modelling report, but we are replacing these with there's information that ECAN holds on its GIS with depth, flood depth and flood velocity, which we can look at different return periods of flood event. This is actually the Ashley River now coming down through into Kaiapoi. So again, we can sort of look at the co-location, the coincidence of these hazards and the infrastructure and think about how they might be impacted. From that, as we go into our resilience project work, it's about what does this mean in terms of outage, level of disruption, time of disruption, who's disrupted, and modelling that into impacts with the Merital. I probably spoke to the GIS portal, the data needs. All we have at the moment is the little diagram at the right there with the transpower lines going through, but we're still in the process of getting GIS stuff from some agencies, such as Main Power in that instance. And finally was just it's a very, very busy slide, but it was really just to show you the Wellington business case and just to highlight that work has been done, and for those that have an interest in it, I can provide further information on it. But it's working through that damage modelling from the left, what's going to kind of happen from the hazard, and they actually just looked at one event, the big earthquake, or a big earthquake, that would hit the Wellington region. We're trying to look multiple hazards. So damage modelling, what's going to happen to the infrastructure, where, what are the outages, where, how long, who's affected, and what are the social, economic impacts of those effects actually going to be, and that modelling that kind of comes out. So it's quite comprehensive. We're aspirational. We'd love to be able to get along the path to do some of this, so we can kind of better understand where our region is going to be, and do it all again. Like Risks and Realities 25 years ago. Just make a final plug for that. And I think it helped. I mean, some of the stuff that we worked out we needed to do, and we did, in my time at the city council, I think was worthwhile. So,
I think one of the recommendations was to check the fault lines in the Canterbury.
Yes, it was, and no one did. Anyway, no, that's all good. Thank you, and happy to take questions, discussion.
Yeah, questions.
Thank
Sam?
you, and good presentation. My question's around the effects of AF8 and the subsequent landslides that are a major possibility, and one or two converging in the Waimakariri Gorge. And it seems like lots of the presentations that we've had so far focus on talking about landslides happening, but there's plenty of examples as you drive past Pearson of mountains falling in half and cutting the lake in half, and the big fall down into Grasmere is one big landslide. If that quantum of material fell into the Waimakariri Gorge, we would end up with a massive lake at the top end waiting to fill up and burst, and all of the protection for the city is based on heavy rainfall. Well, I live in Darfield, and it would probably be a dangerous place to be. West Melton, more particularly, but thinking about even across Rolleston, everywhere in the lower plains, and the river obviously has historically flown across there and out towards Te Wahora Lake Ellesmere, which may not have just been of things filling up. It could have actually been one of the previous 27 recorded incidents of AF8 falling. So I guess I'm just wondering what modelling has been done. It's really hard just to guess where a mountain's going to fall. But that's the type of intensity, and the length of the shaking is probably more of the issue, around what level of dam being built in the Waimakariri Gorge would actually start to impact on the city.
It's a really good question, actually, and I don't know the direct answer to it, but I know that there's been a lot of research done by a guy, Tom Robinson, who's now back at University of Canterbury, on the landslide risks and where they might fall. You know, we've done a bit of kind of mapping. We've drawn from the various ECAN reports and bits and pieces that have been done looking at landslide potential. But the idea of it blocking the Waimak and any river system, in fact, is quite right. And, you know, the volume and the height and what that would mean and how would you remediate it, because you don't want to be going back in during aftershock periods either.
Well, it'll be Australian Air Force territory, isn't it?
It's right. It's not going to be
something big.
It's not going to be.
Explosive.
That's right. It's not going to be a well-engineered dam either, is it?
No.
So you know, I think it's something that we probably just need to make sure we account for in what we're doing, what we're looking at.
Thank you.
You know, in the hazard. So good question.
Any other questions? I mean, it's an exceptional report, and it does remind us, because I think sometimes we forget our own history. I mean, I know about what was it, the Advanced Centre for Engineering that did the report, yeah. And I only came across it, you know, as a young MP going through an earthquake. But thank God that work was done, because it was the basis for Orion doing all of its resilience work on the substations. And I always use their slide. It's in one of their reports, where you've got two substations sitting side by side. You know, they're the little brick ones, and one's standing up and the other one's fallen down. And the one that fell down is one they gave to a local scout group when they decommissioned it. And of course it wasn't strengthened, the others were. They spent, I always use the figure of something like $6 million on resilience, and protected $60 million worth of assets, but meant that the power wasn't switched off for 3 months, as opposed, you know, it was off for 3 weeks. So, you know, that sort of forward thinking and those sorts of questions, they are absolutely key to an uncertain future. So, you know, thank you very much.
They are, and you know, I can remember working with John O'Donnell on that, and I think in my days when I was managing roads and bridges for the city, we actually did a couple of bridges with we strengthened them for the cables, or we put cables in my bridges. But you know, and that's the thing about the collaborative kind of work together as agencies that's so important. Thank you.
Which is why we're so happy to see Three Waters just disappearing like that. Anyway.
Thanks for that, and I've just mentioned to Giles it would be really good to get you into ECAN for a briefing for councillors. I know a lot of the information is out, and we talk about it here, there, but it was a really good collective of things, so they're great.
Yeah, no, thanks. And there is a lot more information there, and I had a really good meeting with Helen, Jack and Nick Griffiths yesterday, actually, just kind of where are you at with all the stuff on the GIS, and it's good stuff.
Well, we have joint sessions with ECAN councillors. I wonder if we could get you to do a presentation to that, because it's such a good joined up issue, and I'd like all councillors really to have a
We'd
view.
like to do more of that and to expand it on what that was a very brief resume, if you like, but
really good.
expand it.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks very much. And congratulations on getting the funding too. So would someone like to move that we receive that? That's Neil, yes, and Nigel, sorry. God, I'm not having a good day. It's Friday afternoon. I do apologise. So that's been moved by Neil, seconded by Nigel. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And then we now move on to Simon, National Emergency Management Agency update.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Yeah, as mentioned before, there is probably a couple of updates to the written report you've got. The main one's around the Emergency Management Bill. It's the targeted engagement moves out a month, starts basically in February. So that's the key part of that one. The other update, this morning I attended a DPMC hosted regional leadership group meeting to update the regional leadership groups across the country around the COVID protection framework and how that's a fast-moving beast. It was made pretty clear by our national director that CDEM would only be in support of health in the COVID protection framework as it moves into the regions. Health have, it's a bit unfortunate they're not here, but they have got increased capability apparently in the regions to support planning for the COVID resurgence in the community, and that includes isolating for people in the community as well, for the welfare for them, alongside MSD. And our role will be to update the National Resurgence Plan with that new information coming out of the COVID protection framework and get that out to the CDEM groups probably this afternoon.
Sorry, say that again?
So the National Resurgence Plan, which sets out how CDEM groups operate under COVID-19 at the moment, will be updated to include the COVID protection framework that DPMC is running for RLGs.
I'm completely lost.
Yep.
So I'm struggling with this.
So
this
the regional
new
leadership
regional
groups,
leadership group.
Yeah, you're not
So
the only one.
who does the regional leadership group report to?
That is a good question.
I know, because there isn't an answer to it.
No, there isn't. There's no legislated mandate that I'm aware of, other than through the public sector lead, the public sector.
You said, no, but we're local government. You don't treat us like we're part of the public service.
It is one of the questions that was asked by several of the mayors and CEs on that call this morning, and basically DPMC were asked to clarify that. So I can't answer your question at the moment.
So there are mayors on the regional leadership group?
There were mayors on this call this morning, yes.
Oh, this is around the country?
Around the country, yes. Yeah, it was a national one.
But our regional leadership group doesn't include mayors?
No.
So why do others include mayors?
Because some of them are set up, I can only talk about the South Island. Some of them are a mixture of mayors and chief executives. Yeah, most of them are actually. Mixture of joint committee and KEG, with MSD leading. So Craig Churchill on the West Coast, he's the public sector lead for West Coast, Nelson, Melbourne and Tasman. So he's the chair of the RLG there. And it was the MSD Commissioner in Southland who looks after Southland and Otago as well.
And here it's Ben Clark for Corrections, who's a Public Sector Commissioner, and him and Dawn Baxendale are co-chairing the COVID group.
I know Dawn's been invited to take over the role that Hamish was playing as but he's the regional key group for the Mayoral Forum, which is different from the grouping for CDEM. This feels like a nothing is joined up here, and exacerbated by the absence of health today. So, and Ben doesn't link with this group.
No, he doesn't.
He links with the Mayoral Forum.
I think he should meet with this group.
I know.
Ben and I were talking, and I think we'll have him to the next joint committee.
There was an action out of the Mayoral Forum today, which is that myself, Sam, Dawn, Hamish and Jim, and Jim Palmer, as well as Jim Harland. Yeah, so are going to meet with Ben to talk through this whole structural interesting thing.
Christchurch City were represented on the call by Mary Richardson this morning, so she will have some notes as well, I would say.
Yes, I know, but there is no reporting line.
No, there isn't.
So, and that's the trouble, is that it does feel like a top-down exercise. That, that's what it feels like. And I'm not criticising you at all, Simon. It's just, it is what it is, and it's almost like, why am I surprised? But I really want us to have a really good model of engaging locally, sub-regionally, regionally, and probably where that fits South Island wide and nationally. But anyway, we'll get there. So was that the only change that you wanted to make? Was that just to that?
It's just, those two updates to the paper that's in the agenda.
And the engagements, the method of engaging.
That's a good point. I'm not sure.
Can I just ask the question again? So engagement goes out to February. Is that because information isn't ready for February, or will the information be sitting there but not released until February? I just wonder, given time constraints, is there a possibility for MERS, forums, whatever, to have that information with a slightly extended timeline to digest it before we enter into a consultation phase if it was available?
I can go back to the project lead and ask them that, because my understanding is that that'll all be ready, but the reason why the engagement's been pushed out is because nobody will be around to engage.
So I understand the engagement, the conversation, but if it's sitting there, you've got nothing to do for a week, you can sit down and read it and digest it before you get busy again. That was just my thinking there.
I can go back and ask that question.
Yep. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through you, just to inform you that Ngāi Tahu is putting in their own submission to the review of the Act, given that there was no mention of Māori in the Act previous. And also, that'll be discussed with Te Rūrango Ngāi Tahu at the table next Thursday. And thank you for informing us, but we ourselves have got an idea of how we should work with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you know whether the hui engagements that are referred to here, are they likely to be regional or locally based?
I think they're going to be regional. That's my understanding, but as I say, I'll have to confirm that.
I just wonder how far they really want to be reaching out, because, I mean, actually, if it's 10th of January to the 28th of February, but that then goes
out a month
to mid-February it's then to the end of March. It's only a month before you analyse everything that you've fed back and prepare a cabinet paper. In fact, it's less than a month, because you've got to have it in front of a cabinet committee a week before.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think my letter's just got a little bit more expanded. Write to the minister about the time frame, engagement, etc. All right. Sorry, I've been very annoying today, but I was annoyed when I read the agenda. So, is there, well, I'm happy to move that. Is there a seconder for that? Yes, John. Are there any questions, any discussion? Put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Sorry about this.
That's right.
Over to you. Next item, the appointments.
Right, so just a set of appointments here for group controllers, alternate group controllers, and local controllers, and a group recovery manager and group welfare manager. I don't know if you want me to go through all the individuals. There's obviously Sean Poff's coming on board as a group controller, group manager, which is great. We've locked at two new alternate group controllers, Catherine Harborough and Catherine Traught, both directors within Environment Canterbury. Currently, other than myself and soon to be Sean, there actually isn't any other ECAN staff member as a group controller presently, so that's quite important. Local controller, Miles McConway for Christchurch City Council. Just noting that, you know, when we appoint our local controllers now, they can operate within the Canterbury region, which is really good.
He's trained in this CDEM controller.
He hasn't done the training yet, but he has got a lot of experience in that he was the director.
Yeah, no, I can see that, but we've also, don't we now require that?
He'll need to do it still,
Yeah.
yes.
So I mean,
yes.
just noting that he will I think it's important to note it, because I don't think people should think they can't do it.
Yep.
I mean, I know he doesn't, but
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
no, so I've already had a request to run some initial controller training
Great.
next year.
Good.
Yep. Then there's the Group Recovery Manager. So currently Peter Cameron is our interim Group Recovery Manager, and Richard Bull will become our Group Recovery Manager as a half-time FTE, starting in a couple of weeks' time. And it's worth noting that Richard was the author of our after-action report. So I think we're gaining a very, very qualified person in the recovery space. And then Group Welfare Manager, so Jessica Peterson, our Group Welfare Manager, is on a one-year secondment to Environment Canterbury. So we've brought in Catherine Fleischman as a Group Recovery Manager, not the Group Recovery Manager, so Jessica and her can support each other when an event is occurring. Catherine's a new graduate. She's fitting into the office really well and already contributing to our work program, which is great. I think that's all of them, yes.
Yep.
So there's a recommendation to make those appointments as alternate group controllers, local controllers, Group Welfare Manager and Group Welfare Manager.
John?
Madam Chair, can I just ask the question? Sean Poff is coming in out of a different area. What training processes will be available to him to bring him up to speed as quickly as possible, given, I guess, the role that he has in that group controller in the legislative space?
He will get a briefing from, I've already given him a briefing already, and he'll continue to get briefings. There's a couple of things that I think are really important as he comes on board. One will be to actually come and visit all of you in January, February. So I'll start arranging those visits with your EAs before Christmas. The second will be looking at getting him onto our initial controller training and then into the national RANS framework training as well, which you'll have to do. Yep.
Would you like to move it?
Yes, I'd move, thank you.
Thank you. John, seconded by Craig. Any discussion? Put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And now the finance report, and over to you again, James.
Yes, so the first quarter for this year, financial reports included as a dashboard. Just a couple of things to note. There is an underspend currently, particularly in goods and services due to the group plan review not commencing, and the Alpine Fault 8 work planning hasn't continued as much as we would like, and it's mainly a result of COVID response. Those two projects will end up having some spend next year. Whether we completely catch up, I would not want to predict at the moment. And there's an increase of grants of $175,000 for that resilience funding that Mark Gordon's talked about. And a bit of unbudgeted expenditure due to the May-June flooding and the COVID resurgence response. I think, though, just on that, it's useful to note that we will still achieve reserve replenishment based on that this year, which I know this committee was interested in seeing happen. For the annual plan, just noting the first 3 years of the long-term plan here, and we're not recommending any changes to the annual plan. However, just want to introduce a discussion around our Group Recovery Manager, our new one, Richard Bull, currently as a half FTE. We're going to put together a business case as to whether that should be a full FTE, like a lot of our other CDM groups around the country now are. And we've just started very initial discussions with iwi, particularly with Jamie, around putting a case study forward around an iwi role in the CDM group office, and quite excited by the potential for that. I just, with the recommendation there, can I just make a change to point 3? It says notes the proposed increase of the group recovery manager. Can I change that to note the proposed development of a business case for group recovery manager from half to full, and the proposal for the iwi role in the regional CDM office?
Yep. Any questions? John?
Through you, Madam Chair, does that fit within the budget that we have, or would that require an increase in budget? Could we get one in under our own cap, or just an understanding of what the cost implication might be, given my role at our table across the road?
Yes. My initial talk with the finance team at Environment Canterbury, that changing that half to a full would be around about a $60,000 increase. That we would need to change our budget to accommodate that. So I don't think this change will happen, or it won't happen in this coming annual plan. It will come in year 3 of the long-term plan.
Right, so my question was, would it fit under the cap, and you're saying, no, we would need extra to make it happen?
Yep.
And that would be considered in the appropriate
Yep.
Annual plan?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. Or the LTP?
It'll be
Annual plan.
It'll be the third year annual plan.
Third year, so it's an annual plan, yeah. Right, so we've got the recommendations in front of us, noting that one that's been changed. Would someone like to move the recommendations? Yes, you would like to move them, Brad, Nigel, and seconded by Graham, and I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. The next is Controller's report. James, again.
Thank you. So yeah, just a report there on the COVID resurgence, particularly noting the resurgence in August. Some changes from our first one. You know, Health identified themselves as the lead agency for this, with Civil Defence Emergency Management being asked to provide support to them, and we had quite a range of support provided to Health by CDEM and our councils, ranging from pharmaceutical deliveries, assisting with wayfinding at vaccination centres, and actually going out and checking on vulnerable sectors of the community. So yes, CDEM has still been involved in the health response to COVID. I'd like the group to acknowledge and congratulate the central government agencies in the welfare space for the mahi that they've put into preparing for the COVID lockdown. So a significant change from the first one of CDEM delivering and looking after most of the food security to MSD picking up, supporting that food security and making sure that it happens. So I think a great piece of work. We did have a request in October from NEMA to refresh our group COVID response plan. That has been done and will come out to this group for review and consultation. But we know that there's some cabinet papers still on the way about regional leadership groups and a few other things that we might as well incorporate that into it before bringing it to you and then having to bring it back again, sort of thing. I think it is worth noting that, perhaps for future joint committee meetings that we do get Ben from the RLG along to provide an update as well. And then on 28th of October we did end up with 2 COVID Delta cases here in Christchurch. Very quick reaction from Health in that there was minimal community spread from that. And both of those cases have now been stood down. But of course we've had some more cases just in the last couple of days. Flood cost model. So at the last joint committee there was a request via CDM group, via BEAD, as to whether or not we could look at capturing the costs more clearly of flood responses and other emergencies, not just taking into account that immediate cost that we can find out pretty quickly. So I've been working with Gary McDonald from Market Economic Research, using the merit tool that Mark Gordon's already spoken about from the Lifelines point of view. He believes that it won't take much effort for him to adjust that tool to take into some of those social costs that we want to include. And so he's just looking at the moment as to whether or not we as a group would have to pay for that, or whether he can get funding out of Resilience to Nature's Challenge and the other research funding that's available nationally, and he thinks he will be able to. Particularly seen as there would be value in this tool not just being available to us but to all CDM groups to do that costing after an event. And I've just got an update there on our response teams. As you know, quite a few of our territorial authorities have volunteer response teams and some paid staff members involved in those. They have had, they've provided a significant impact into our communities over the years. The national registration process a few years ago fell over. It's been revitalised, and NEMA have full-time staff working on developing a new registration process, and that's being released to the teams to have a look at next Wednesday. I think that's really fantastic. So an outcome of that is that KEG in particular will have to sign off on any new applicants or any new registrations, and part of that is we need to have comfort that the teams are meeting a gap in capability with our partner agencies. So as a group we need to do some work on that gap analysis to make sure we aren't duplicating effort, and so that'll kick off very early in the new year as well. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
A question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm really pleased to see those response teams back on the agenda, because there was a view that they were going to just die a death and no one wanted them. So those roadblocks are out of the way, or as you've explained it, everyone's got excited again. Are there still roadblocks or challenges in getting those teams registered? You've talked about the gap analysis. Is that going to be a particularly difficult process, or is your expectation that with a little bit of work these teams will gain registration and move on? Because I just think of what they provide and achieve in our rural communities within our urban populations of flood. They are a vital part of the service. So are there still challenges that might be faced, or do you think it's a process that can be smoothed?
I think the gap analysis process will be reasonably easy. We did a stock take previously in 2018, I think it was. So we've got a foundation already in place. In regards to other things that will slow the process down, the training requirement and the health and safety requirement to give comfort to our partner agencies that these teams can be safe is higher than it was before, and teams will need to do a bit of work to get up to speed to meet the new standards. So here at Canterbury, we're already, with MTech, our Emergency Management Training Centre, we're already looking at the additional training and how we can put that in place for the teams. Yeah.
Anyone else? No? I kind of wanted to briefly just acknowledge James, because this will be his last role stepping into the role that Neville held, and I just wanted to say thank you, because it's always hard to sort of step into someone else's shoes, for a temporary period. But I just want to say how much it's been appreciated, and I know that Bede actually did want to say something too, because Bede's been working very closely with James. But James started as a volunteer in 1996, and here he is now, and I just wanted you to know how valued you are and how extraordinarily grateful that we are to you that you've stepped into this role. So thank you very much. So Bede, would you?
Oh, look, thank you, Madam Chair, and it has been, I guess when you look at the
real essence of civil defence and emergency management. It's about resilience and redundancy. And when Neville left, actually, James just stepped seamlessly into it. And it was like we barely skipped a beat. In fact, you know, he has carried on.
Hasn't felt like it.
I'm sure it has.
Oh, well, there you go, even more, isn't it? But you look at
It's
some of
better
the
when
work
you make it look that way.
that he has been coordinating in terms of we're putting up and pushing against, you know, to get some funding for things around the resilience of the bridge and the roads and so on, looking at the whole of cost of these events, not just that there's a bridge washed out or something like that or roads are gone. And James has taken that on. So, and look, it's been a privilege. And I think the quality of the papers, you see the quality of the Lifelines work, you see the reflections in that May, June flood report, and you see that this has been somebody who has wanted to continue to lead and see the civil defence here and grow on its capability. So it has been a privilege and a pleasure, James, and I really, really do hope that we will see a lot more of you and you'll continue on. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very
Giving me
much.
the chance to acknowledge.
So, so on that note, I'll move the report be received. Sam Broughton will second that. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And the last item is the notification of items released from PX, and that's just a noting provision. Is there a mover? Craig, seconded by Graham. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. I know that the next item is extraordinary and urgent business, at which I'm supposed to say are there an extraordinary or urgent matters for discussion, but there are a lot of people in the room that haven't been given an opportunity because they haven't had anything to report on. I don't know whether there's anything that people wanted to take the opportunity to raise by way of general business at a CDEM meeting. John? No? It's all right. I mean, I was just leaving it open as an opportunity. The next meeting will be held... Oh, sorry, John.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things. Obviously, there's a bit of unrest at the moment across all of Canterbury with... what's that going on? Yeah, just there's a lot of unrest at the moment around Canterbury with protests.
Yeah.
These are starting to occur quite regularly and will be occurring for some time, and right across all of your respective areas. So please engage with us if there are any concerns. We're monitoring any major national security issues that sit in behind that. It's a different sort of a look and feel at the moment. It's not just your normal protesters that we've been dealing with up until now, so your national security threats or your 1080s or those sort of disadvantaged people. We're now getting, if you like, broader, wider members of the community getting involved. We will allow them to protest within the parameters of the law. So if there are any issues, any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. We've got it. We've got a plan. We'll control and command it. But if it gets into the last thing we want is to see a situation occurring in the likes of we've seen in Australia. So that's the last thing we want to. Don't want to see that civil unrest. So we're working very closely. One of the key guys that's dealing with it is a guy, Derek Tate, who's the main organiser, and we have connections into him, along with other partner agencies of New Zealand SIS and such like as well. So just want to make sure that if you have any concerns, please come directly back to me. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Sadly, they choose the starting point as the square where I live. So I'm usually out helping with the vaccination effort, though. Thank you for that, John. I mean, it's a salutary note to end on. Just the next item is just that the next meeting will be held in February. One of the discussions that we had at the Canterbury Mayoral Forum just now was to sound people out about shifting this meeting to the Thursday afternoon as opposed to a Friday afternoon. Obviously do my brain a lot better, but it's do I hear an allergic reaction to Thursday afternoon for a change for this meeting? It's just that it ties in with the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, And we'd rather that the Canterbury Mayoral Forum be given more room to move, and that this one ties in with the Regional Transport Committee, which meets on a Thursday. So if we could, John, as the Deputy Chair, I should...
That's right. I'm just totally open. I do know when we had Regional Transport and CDM, we were conflicted in time, and time got squeezed.
That's because we had three.
We had three, so I'm not opposed to the shift to the Thursday, as long as we still have our time and our opportunity for conversation. Yeah. That's the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah, no, we'll have at least 2 hours. We'll have 2 hours on a 2 hours on a Thursday afternoon. If that's, I'm not getting any. Good, Sam. That looks good. Okay, right. Thank goodness I remembered to ask. Okay. I don't know, because the regional transport one, I don't know what time they start.
I think we'll just leave that to the Secretariat to try and figure out the times that are going to work to fit 2 meetings in an afternoon with location, so we'll get back to everyone on that.
I think that the early thinking is one of them will be 2 to 4 and the next one will be 4 to 6.
Right, I'll just close.
Not as good as 1 till 3. 3 to 5.
Right, I'm going to close with a karakia. Unuhia te pō, whirimarama, tomo kia, te ao, whatu tangata, tatai ki ronga, tatai ki aro, tatai ahoro, homie huie, tai ki e. Kia ora, thank you.